Today we're here at the White Oak Civil War Museum located in Stafford County, Virginia. It's curated by a gentleman named D.P. Newton, who is a native of the area. Now, when he was 9 years old, his dad went out and he bought him a metal detector because his dad was really into history and he wanted his son to be a part of that. So today we're going to meet with him. We're going to go through the museum, see some of the thousands of artifacts that they found in the area. Now, they all mostly came from the encampment of 1862 to 1863. There are literally thousands of pieces that are not only in this museum, but still left under your feet. So at any point in time, you can walk out your back door and find some great artifacts. Welcome, Fredericksburg Underground, the Stafford Edition. So before we get to DP, we wanted to talk to his wife a little bit. She's been around right before the museum opened and actually saw some of the hard work that DP put into making this whole museum happen. Bonnie, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. My name is Bonnie Newton. I met DP when he was still working on the renovation of the 1912 schoolhouse. Both he and his mom, who would be 96 this week, went to school here. What intrigued me about DP and attracted me to him the most was his love of history and his morals and his principles, which I always felt actually mirror the 1860s man. Everything in this building has been touched by him in some way in the renovation. All the cases were built by him and designed by him. The replica of the 6-pound cannon in the front when you come in was made by him. He cut the tree down and hand-hewed the carriage and the spokes, going by 1849 Dixie Gun Works blueprints. When he built the cannon, he had no intentions of having a museum. He just wanted a cannon. When I met DP, he was in the basement. The Stafford County had required him to replace all the wooden piers underneath of the old school because of the weight of the collection itself. With garden spades and shovels and buckets, he and Dan Poppin dug buckets and buckets of dirt out of this old building and hauled it away. I saw in that a passion and a determination of a man who wanted to honor these soldiers that had camped around here. There was as many as 130,000 or more Yankee troops, as he calls them, were camped in Stafford. And I saw with our own family and relatives, because DP and I are distant cousins, how devastated Stafford County was during the Civil War and how that devastation lasted for many, many years. It was 1970 before Stafford came back economically with other counties. And I saw with DP how he wanted to capture all pieces of the history of those soldiers that were camped here and the ones that lived here and how their lives were affected. People come from all over here to find out where their ancestors were camped. And in those places of Stafford that are not developed, that he has permission, he actually takes them there. One man from New Jersey actually stood and cried in one of the camps, knowing that that's the actual ground that his grandfather had stood in. Another one didn't even realize that he had moved here from another state, but his ancestor had actually not only camped, but died in one of the camps around Stafford. And he actually lives just a short ways from that exact spot. So DP's a wealth of history. He's just a treasure for this county with his knowledge of history and his passion for these soldier boys, as he calls them, on both sides of the war, both the blue and the gray, the Yankee and the Confederate. This man has not only a wealth of knowledge, but a deep, caring passion to get the history right and to just honor their memories.
So we're finally here. We're inside the building with Mr. D.P. Newton. And he's going to tell you a little bit about how he got into relic hunting with his father. And then we're going to go see some of the things they actually found. D.P., it's a pleasure to be sitting down here having this conversation with you. You started roughly around 9 years old.
Yeah, that's correct.
And you started relic hunting with some cousins?
No, but the cousins talked Daddy into metal detecting. That's how Daddy got started.
In what areas did you guys really start?
Right across the road from where we lived at. It's a hill there that belonged to my granddaddy, and that's where the first place where we went was up on the hill.
And what kind of stuff were you finding?
Well, the very first thing Daddy found was the eagle button. Then he found some bullets, some mini balls.
Okay. What was it like going out with your dad and finding things? Was it something that he had to drag you along, or what was that like?
No, we were both into it, ready to go.
So it was like a treasure hunting adventure.
Well, for a young boy, I guess you could call it a treasure hunt, but it was more of a challenge, see what you was going to find, the way it turned out a little later.
So all in all, how many years have you been, since you started, how long have you been collecting these relics and treasures and memorabilia? How long have you been doing this?
Well, it's been 54 years, but 30 of that was me and Daddy metal detecting. And then after he got the Alzheimer's and eventually died, since then it's been more collecting the information through regimentals and letters and diaries, trying to figure what regiments was in the camps where we hunted at.
Now, how many total camps have you discovered that you found?
I never did count them. It's a lot of them.
Okay.
100 and some, 200,
Wow.
I don't know.
Just here in the Stafford County.
Yeah.
What was your most favorite find of them all?
I kind of think I'm all equal. It's been some unusual finds.
What was the most unusual?
Or curious. We found 44 plates and buckles and 11 bayonets buried in one little hole down the road here. It was curious to wonder why they took and buried them. It was the cartridge boxes. They had U.S. plates, and but they had 2 U.S. buckles. Had the belts thrown in with them, eagle plates.
So, since you started and your daddy passed away, you carried on and continued. Has that kind of been a way of kind of carrying your dad's memory with you? A bond that you guys had so long ago and you just carried it on?
No, that memory was sealed all the years that we metal detected and I was with him. So, being as we found the stuff, we you become a caretaker of it, kind of look after of it. You actually can't own it, but you can, as long as you have it, you feel that it's safe, keep it all together.
And you haven't sold a single piece of it, have you?
No, gave some bullets away to some kids or some people that's visited the museum that was very interested into it.
Okay. The cannon behind you, you made that.
Mhm.
What was it that struck you that made you say, you know what, I want a cannon?
Well, when Daddy carried me out to Chancellorsville battlefield when I was little, that's the object on the whole battlefield that fascinates you was a cannon. So I always liked to have one ever since I was little. So being as I don't have enough money to buy even a reproduction one. The only way that you could get one, you would have to make it. So that's how that come to being.
So was it this piece that got you wanting to do a museum, or how did that transfer from being, building a cannon to having a museum?
No, the cannon come first. Didn't have no idea of having a museum. That my cousin suggested, it might be a good idea of a museum, and this building was available. The White Oak Fire Department was going to lease it, but it was too much work to do, so they gave up on the idea of leasing it. So it become available, and thought maybe it'd be a good idea, because that house and all was all bundled up and all, and actually not very many people got to see it. Thought maybe some kids or somebody very interested in the artifacts would like to see them.
Well, I'd very much appreciate if you could take me back and kind of show us a couple of the awesome things you have back here, and give us a little bit of background on maybe where you found it and kind of where it came from and how to identify it.
Yeah, that'd be good.
So everything you find when you're relic hunting isn't necessarily always belt buckles and bullets and rifles and bayonets. Some things you'll find actually are reflections that the soldiers, they were still people. They were still curious. And when they were in camp, sometimes they would go out and they would look for relics. Like the things you see behind me here, you'll find marbles, you'll find pipes, you'll find all sorts of things, frames from satchels. DP, can you tell us a little bit about some of the things and you found these, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. They're curious, just when they're young. They find in arrowheads at the bottom of the hut sites. If you dig them out, sometimes you find an arrowhead right on the floor of the hut. Petrified wood, petrified shells, parts of ornaments broken off of different things. Like in this case here, that piece of chandelier, that prism. Yeah, they're picking up stuff, bringing it back to camp, leaving them in the huts when they leave.
And some things were things that their families would send to them.
Yeah.
Just everyday things from the house that kind of reminded them, hey, you still have a home. You still have a place to come back to when it's done.
Yeah, they send them stamps, pipes, combs, shoes, razors, or they could buy it from a sutler. He sold civilian stuff to soldiers that the military didn't issue to them.
And these were, again, they were all primarily found inside the huts.
Yeah, dug out the huts, yeah.
Now, how many huts did you find over, if you had to put a number on it, while you were looking in the camps? What was the average number of huts you would find in a camp?
If it's a pretty good sized camp, it's a few camps had 200 or a little over 200 hut sites in it. Some has 50, some, but it's hard to determine because what you're looking at, physically looking at, is holes in the ground. They excavated and built a hut on it. But the above ground huts, it's hard to determine. So if you're in a camp, you're looking at the dug, excavated huts, but how many above ground huts was there included in that camp, so you can't not see. So it's hard to determine exactly how many huts was in that camp, only you know how many excavated hut sites you're looking at.
Now, what's a good telltale sign that when you find something and you start digging, how do you know that you're in a hut site?
Of course, the huts that you can see that's remaining, the depressions, you could quickly determine them. But the large amount of huts were covered up by the farmers after the war so they could work the fields. And to determine them, the earth that they filled the huts back in is mixed. So it's easy in red clay. If you're in red clay soil and you dig down, and your clay is about 8 to 10 inches, 12 inches deep, and your hut is 1.5 to 2 foot down deep. See, that's mixed soil, and it's a different color. It's gray and all mixed up. And the average ground that you're digging in is, say, 10 or 12 inches deep, and you can drop down to 14, 16 inches, and it's still mixed ground. And that's how you can tell it's been covered up. So what you do, you remove all the mixed ground out until you hit the side of that ground that has never been dug, and you can see it right away. And you can follow the side inside that hut perimeter all the way around.
Now, you had mentioned to me earlier that predominantly you would find the fireplaces would be at an end, but you mentioned a curiosity that some huts were irregular. Now, what made them irregular?
Few huts that we've seen that had the firebox right in the corner of the hut. I mean, not square with the corner, but you know, the corner comes like this. The firebox was here, right in the corner. Generally, it's in the side. You know, it could be in the center, off to the side, near the end. But these are catacornered right in the corner, which is odd, but I've seen a few of them like that.
It could be a reflection that somebody knew how to build a house, and they was like, well, I'm gonna make mine a little different.
Yeah, it's different.
Well, we're gonna move on to another one that's gonna give you a little bit of an idea. This next one, I'm not gonna say too much. I'm actually kind of excited to check it out. So DP, we're over here at this other extremely impressive case. Everything you found in it came from one cavalry site.
That's correct.
Now, you and your dad found all of this over the course of 10 years, you said,
yes.
Right? What drove you guys to this site? What led you there?
We had a cousin that had metal detected over 8 years before, and he carried me over and showed me where it was at.
What was some of the first things y'all found?
Most of it was bullets, the first things we found there, because the grass was so high. It was a farm, and basically it was hay fields. And a certain time of year you couldn't hunt it, so you had to hunt the woods and you had to cut the hay. And mostly over there was bullets in there that you found. Large majority was bullets. And then we found some buckles and spurs and bottles, dug some huts out. That's where the bottles and stuff come from.
Now those, I see a lot of blob top bottles, and which was mainly sodas and beer, and that's what the blob tops typically were of that time.
Yeah, they whiskey and beer, and there's food bottles, pickle bottles, and inkwells, and such as that.
And you got a really cool thing over on the wall, the pickets to tie your horses up with.
Yeah, they're picket pins. They basically, you could call them a portable hitching post. That's where you stake your horse out.
As obviously they leveled all the trees around, so you didn't have anything to tie your horse to.
Yeah, a lot of times they were in areas that was open, no trees.
So you've got thousands of bullets that you brought up, and it looks like, you know, a lot of different types, sizes, everything from your pistols and your rifles. How long did it take you guys to actually excavate this entire thing?
It was never finished. There's subdivision built in there. In your lifetime, you would never get what was there. It's probably perhaps the most bullets in one camp of any camp that was in Stafford County was in that camp.
And it was a cavalry camp. Whose camp was it?
Averil's, General Averil's, 2nd Division Cavalry.
Did you guys take? Did you have a camera at the time that you could take pictures of?
No. It was later years that we got a camera. But never had, the whole time me and Daddy metal detector, we never owned a camera. But what few pictures we got was taken by somebody else.
Now, you told me an interesting story. You have a saber that is extremely good condition, considering. Tell me the story about how you found that.
Daddy found that saber. It was buried in red clay. It was just the size of the hole was just big enough to get that complete saber in and another scabbard. And I don't know why they buried it, but we thought maybe we had found two sabers after we dug the first one out, but unfortunately it was just a scabbard they buried right, just as neat, laid it right beside of it, and they covered it up, and I don't know why.
So basically, it's a mystery within a mystery. You got a complete saber basically buried in its own grave, and nobody knows why. But you can go to your library, come to your museums, research the history, and maybe you can answer some of the questions. So next we're going to show you a rebuild of a camp that DP has done himself. And I think you're going to be pretty impressed. So we're here at the last segment of the show, and I think we saved the best for last. What you're looking at is a reproduction of a Civil War winter encampment. And we're going to have DP tell you a little bit more about that.
These huts were made by looking at photographs and reading accounts that soldiers wrote about on how they constructed their huts.
And how much work went into this? How long did it take you to make it?
It took a fairly good while. It took longer to go and find the logs and cut them and bring them here.
So you did every log yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And how much of it was stuff that you read, but how much of it was just things that you put together yourself, just saying, okay, well, this had to work this way, this had to work that way? Or was it pretty definitive by the books?
It's pretty much the way they did it. It's basically like you would do a log cabin, a log house, somewhat.
Right. So they kept a lot of good records of what was around them and so forth.
Oh yeah, they kept excellent accounts of the way they did things.
So this is kind of a, when you're going through the encampments and you're relic hunting and, definitely keeping good records of what you're finding, you can kind of picture this is what it used to look like. And this will give you a good idea of when you start digging down and you find those clay walls, and you know what the edge of the cabin
Yeah, that's
was.
right.
So this will give you an idea of what to look for. So tell me a little bit about how they kept the rain out. Tell me about how they kept the tops from blowing off during a storm.
Well, they have blowed roofs off during heavy winds and all. The best example is this one here I've seen in the book. They have the rafters and covered it with the shelter halves, but they put sticks on the outside and put that log on top, and that holds the sticks in place so there's no nails in the canvas, only nailed down at the bottom. That keeps the wind from blowing it. That's the best example I've seen. But basically, they just stretched the canvas over it and tacked the sides, perimeter of the cloth.
And how deep would these huts usually be?
On average, anywhere from 1.5 feet to 2-3 foot in the ground.
Just big enough for them to walk in.
Yeah, to give them enough headroom to, on the excavated ones, it gives them enough headroom to walk down through the center of the hut.
Okay. And you find a lot of artifacts just more inside of the hut or more of it outside?
In the camp itself, there were more artifacts on the outside of the hut, but today, I would say it's probably, you have a better chance to find artifacts if you found a hut and digging the hut out. Because the area of the camp's been, like in Stafford, they've been hunted for 60 years with a metal detector.
Mm.
But when the farmers cover the huts up, you cannot see them. And if you're lucky enough to find a hut and dig it out, you have good chances of finding pretty good in them. Some huts don't have much in them, but some does.
Now, your museum is not government funded.
No.
And this is all done through passion and donation.
Yep. What keeps it going is the admission fee. The people that comes through the door and looks at the museum keeps the museum going.
So we want to thank Mr. Newton here for welcoming us in and giving us a tour of his fine museum. He's given us a wealth of information, but there's a whole lot more to be found. Now, if you have an ancestor, say great-great-granddad, that was in the Union Army, and he fought in either the Battle of Fredericksburg or the Battle of Chancellorsville, chances are this gentleman right here can tell you what regiment, where he was at, and possibly where he spent some of his last days. So we hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks for watching. Tune in next time. This is Fredericksburg Underground, Stafford Edition.